Welcome back to historic Exeter. Welcome back to day 2 of the 7th annual Exeter UFO Festival. Thank you very much. There's a couple of seats still up front if you want to move up. My name is Bill Smith. I'm the past president of the Exeter Area Kiwanis Club. Again, this is a major fundraiser for the Exeter Area Kiwanis Club for local children's charities and youth programs. So thank you for your participation. Thank you for the t-shirts, the buttons, the hot dogs, and everything else we're selling out there. I want to take the opportunity to thank, because sometimes I forget to do this, all of the speakers who have been here this weekend. Certainly Richard Dolan, Kathleen Martin, Ryan Malahi, Peter Robbins, Paul and Ben Eno, Denise Stoner, Stephen Mather-Lees, and Seacoast Saucers of New England organization, who's been a big help in putting this on as well. We're privileged this year, as in the past several years, to have Richard Dolan emceeing the festivities yesterday as well as today. As you know, he's one of the world's leading researchers and writers on the subject of UFOs and believes that they constitute the greatest mystery of our time. Richard's latest work, UFOs for the 21st Century Mind, provides a fresh treatment on the entire subject. In it, he discusses the important sightings, the encounters, the politics, the cover-up, ancient aliens, the bizarre science, disclosure, and offers advice on being both critical and open-minded in today's world. Like his previous 3 books, it asks fresh questions and offers new insights to further our understanding of the UFO mystery. Later today, Richard will present his talk, UFOs, 6 Reasons Why the Subject Should Matter to You. He will discuss 6 areas that are deeply affected by our understanding of UFOs: history, politics, energy, science, spirituality, and personal encounters. The end result will be a crystal clear understanding of just why UFOs matter, and indeed, why they will matter to you. So once again, welcome to Exeter. Enjoy your stay, listen and learn, and it's my pleasure to introduce to you again, Mr. Richard Dolan.
Thank you, Bill, very much. Good morning. I'm about to introduce our next speakers with my fancy hat. These are great hats. I had one of these a couple of years ago, and I actually gave it to a friend thinking, I'm coming back to Exeter and I'm getting another one. And these are good. They're right outside. My voice is a little shot. I didn't do anything that warranted this. No debauchery, no late night painting the town red. It's just the universe said, we're doing this to your voice today. I'm really intrigued and happy to introduce our next speakers. I felt for a long time that this subject, it's difficult for people to process when you've had some very strange experience. Who do you talk to? I mean, frequently you don't have anyone to talk to. There's a very strong social, cultural component to this subject, which I've always felt for a long time just gets overlooked. And turns out that there are people in this area who are also concerned with that and doing what they can to help others deal with the extraordinary. Seacoast Saucers of New England is New Hampshire based. They are focused on providing support for people and families in the New England region who have had abduction and encounter experiences. They have worked on creative campaigns to change the social stigma of the topic into a global reality through support, education, and awareness. The Seacoast Saucers continually strives to create safe environments to have difficult conversations regarding the abduction phenomenon and contact experiences. Their whole attitude is they're here to help and you're not alone. And you know, when you think about the trauma and transformation that occurs with the encounter experience that people have, I mean, trauma on the negative side, transformation sometimes on the positive side, but both really require someone to talk to about it. And we don't really have that in our society, but they're here for that. And their talk today is entitled Creating Social Change Around Everyday Ufology. I have a feeling this is going to be really interesting, so let's welcome Seacoast Saucers of New England.
How's everybody doing this morning? It's so great to see all you faces here today, a lot of friendly faces. Just so you know, I am a psychic medium, and standing in front of ghosts and dead people walking into a haunted house is not nearly as terrifying as standing here in front of all of you this morning. So please bear with me, I'm slightly nervous. But I am very happy to be here. This is a cause that is very near and dear to my heart. So we are very glad to have you all here. So we are here to talk about creating social change in everyday ufology today. It's going to be a little bit different than what you're used to for presentations in a situation like this. If you were here yesterday, and if you're going to be staying throughout the day, this might be a little different for you. We are going to ask that you put yourself out there for us. We are just like you. We're local people, and we like to talk about this stuff. So we're encouraging you to get involved in our presentation today. It's going to be interactive, and we want to hear from you. So first, what does social change mean? It means we want to be able to have conversations around ufology, seeing UFOs, ET contact, things like that. We want to be able to have those conversations everywhere and anywhere with anyone without feeling nervous, without having to start the sentence with, "This might sound crazy, but." As a group, when we have meetings, we tell people, you are not allowed to start a sentence with that, because we want you to feel comfortable. You are welcome to say anything you want, no matter how crazy you think other people might think it is. So who is Seacoast Sauces of New England? We want to give you a little bit of background into us. So my name is Valerie. Along with Mike and Chuck here behind me, we came together a couple years ago after working together for a few years in some other projects. You know, we really just have the common passion and the common goal of uniting people in the social change. Some of the things that our group offers: social events. We have Social Saucers. It's a monthly event where anybody who's interested in any aspect of ufology can come and talk about it. We do speaking engagements such as this today, as uncomfortable as it is for us. Skywatch and contact gatherings. So we go out into fields, we go out into mountaintops, and we watch the sky, and we ask for benevolent things to come through for us. Always benevolent. We do investigations. If you've experienced something and you want somebody to come do some research into it, investigate the area, contact us. We do this. We're happy to come talk to you and help you with that. Support services. Again, if you've had an experience and you need somebody to talk to, if you feel you can't talk to somebody in your family or your close friends, contact us. We can do it in the social settings, or we can do it privately, whatever you want. And then, most importantly, the public outreach and education, which is why we're here today, to really talk to people and get the message out there. It is okay to talk about this. More people have had experiences than you would think if you just talk about it. It's amazing when you know, wear that little alien pin and someone goes, "Oh, that's a neat pin." You're like, "Thanks, you know, I've seen a UFO," and they go, "Oh, you know what? So have I, but I've never told anybody." And then you have this great conversation. You never know what's going to happen.
All right, so as Val said, I'm Mike, and what we want to do now is, when we talk about the stigma around encounters, we want to kind of go through and explain what we mean when we say encounter. What is an encounter? So we're going to just kind of quickly go through some of the different aspects that we consider an encounter. Terminology is a big problem within this field and the other paranormal fields, so I think it's best to just kind of lay out what we're talking about when we use certain terms. Seeing a UFO, it may not seem that traumatic to some of us because some of the experiences go a lot deeper and a lot farther. To some people, that's still earth-shattering. It makes them have to realize there's more than what they were told there is. Extraterrestrial contact, that's a big one. This is life-shattering for people, whether it's positive or negative. You have to accept there's no turning back at this point. Something else is out there. unexplained lights in the sky. Again, like we talked about with seeing a UFO, it might not seem all that earth-shattering, but you're forced to stop and relook at everything you've been taught. Spiritual encounters related to ETs and UFOs. This is a very overlooked and under-talked about part of the topic and subject matter. There seems to be a heavy component of spirituality linked to these encounters. And most people who have been through multiple encounters seem to go through some type of transformation leading down a more spiritual path. And of course there's abductions. And just to clarify, because I hear this phrase or question all the time that drives me nuts, I want to be abducted. No. Not because you really don't, but if you want it, it's not an abduction. By definition, abduction is against your will. All right, we want to hear from you. As Val said, we're going to kind of rely on you guys to help us out through this a little bit. Who knows what a UFO is? Thank you very much. For those of you who raised your hands, I'm not a teacher, yell. Yes, unidentified flying object, that's all it means. The society we live in automatically hears those three little letters and thinks extraterrestrial, spacecraft. It doesn't mean that. It does not mean that. So, that's just something we need to keep in mind in moving forward. And here's Chuck.
Thank you, Mike. So my name is Chuck Credo, and I'm going to kind of move this into a little bit more of a public forum here. So we want to hear from you today. Val earlier said that we're going to take a little bit of a turn for something you're not used to for a lecture base here today. We actually want, we're going to challenge some people in this room maybe to take that next step forward in ways you normally wouldn't. And what I mean by that is I'm going to be asking a series of questions, and I'd like to have a show of hands, and I'm going to ask people to be a little brave, because some of these questions you may not want to answer. In fact, I realize that you might be with somebody and that person may not have an idea that you've experienced something. So while I can't force anybody to do it, this is a great time to practice what we're going to be here talking about, which is change starts with us. If we really want to see people having these conversations in everyday life, we have to start somewhere. And that means sometimes us feeling a little uncomfortable, but having that conversation, even in a group of people you don't know. So we want to hear from you. I'm going to ask some questions up here, and I would appreciate if people can take that step for me and just raise your hand if you have had something like this happen. Does everybody feel okay with that? Yes. Let me ask it again. How do people feel about doing that today? Yes. I love the energy in this room already. You know, they were like, you're going to talk in front of Exeter, and you know, Mike and Valerie were like, geez, we're not public speakers. I said, guys, we're going to be there Sunday morning. Hardly anybody's going to be there, but this is great. And the people that are here have so much energy, so we appreciate it. So let's ask the first question. Show of hands. Have you ever seen a UFO? Raise your hands up high. We want to get a good idea. I've got roughly 35 people in the room. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Wow. So about 16 out of 32 people. What is that? Is that about half?
Not about half, yeah.
It is half. It's not about half. It is exactly half, right? Let me just stop there for a second and ask everybody, does that surprise anybody? I see 2 no's, no, and consider where we are, right? So people that come to a festival like this, chances are there's a reason they come to that festival, right? All right, let me ask the next question. Show of hands if you have ever encountered or believe you've encountered an extraterrestrial. This is where it might be hard for people. We have 1 person, right? 2. Wow, somebody wasn't sure, and they started to raise their hand when they saw the other person raise their hand. In fact, I know there are more people, and this is going to help me with our talk today, because I know for a fact that there are more people than 2 in this room that have had that, because I've had talks with so many people here today. Keep that in mind. Next one. Seen an unexplained light in the sky. Raise your hand real high so we can get an idea of that. Could be a little different than a UFO, right? Let's take a look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. I think we can all agree that's different than a UFO because we have 4 more people that have had that experience than a UFO. Isn't that interesting? And we ask that question in a slightly different light as to what happens. Next question. Had a spiritual encounter that could be either ET or UFO related. So raise your hand up high if you feel, in some sense, something related to ETs or UFOs has come into your life in maybe a spiritual way. It could be a dream. What do we mean by spiritual? During a meditation possibly, at night in a dream, messages that you've heard, maybe you don't want to talk to anybody about that. Raise your hands up high if that means something to you, you've had that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 out of 32, that's about 1/3, isn't it? Let me stop there. Does that surprise anybody in this room? I heard a yes, and I heard a lot of no's too, which is interesting. I also noticed, and I'm not going to oust anybody here, there was somebody that didn't want to raise their hand, and they got the courage to do it after they saw 9 other people. Isn't that interesting? And we're going to talk a little bit more about that because we're finding more and more people when they come to these groups, and we'll talk about our groups and what we do because we are based right here in Stratham, the next town over. We have monthly groups where we have these conversations. There aren't many places that you can have these conversations and not feel judged, not feel as though all those negative stigmas are going to happen, and that's what we try to offer for people. So this is a really hard one because if this has happened immediately, you probably don't want anybody to know. We're going to talk a little bit more about the psychological effect of something like that because really it's harder to deal with that than it is even family abuse growing up as a child. I'm going to ask this question, and I don't expect everybody that's had something like this happen, and we're talking about abductions now, to raise their hand, and I understand why somebody wouldn't want to, but I'm just curious, is there anybody brave enough that believes that they have been abducted that feels comfortable raising their hand? Okay, so nobody, right? All right. So the next question I want to ask now that we've kind of gone through that, if you've answered yes to any of these questions, we have one question for you, and that is, have you ever talked to anybody about those experiences? And if so, how was that for you? And I just want to ask people that feel comfortable kind of speaking, what has it been like to either have an experience? At first, did you want to talk to anybody about it? Did you want to keep it inside? What was it like keeping inside? Anybody want to just speak to that real briefly? Over here.
I talk to everybody about all this stuff all the time, and I am known as the crazy witch.
Say that again. Hold on. You said something that was really important. You're known as what?
I'm known as the crazy witch. They think I'm all nuts. Everybody thinks I'm. Ask my son. He knows.
Can I just get a round of applause for her today, folks? I'm going to tell you why I feel so strongly in what you just said. Because in today's society, when we have experiences, we immediately become labeled. It's something, I don't know who here caught Peter Robbins' presentation yesterday about Little Green Men, in which he went through years of New York Times articles. And what he did was he without cherry picking them, he actually looked at these articles and he was able to see the spin that was put on the most major publication in the US through all of these years starting in '47. And what we can start to notice with that is from a very early time, we have been programmed to believe you are crazy, something is wrong with you if you have these experiences. And I really want to say thank you for speaking up here today because that's what we believe in. We are never going to have a change until we start having these conversations with people. So thank you for speaking up because I'm going to be quite honest with you, I don't think you're crazy at all. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what is the truth behind society's beliefs of people who have these experiences in a bit. But I just want to say thank you for speaking up here in front of a bunch of strangers because I know it's not easy. What about other people? What about other people that have had experiences? Was it just as easy as it was for her? So let me be clear what I think I hear you saying, which is you've seen lights in the sky. You don't claim that they're necessarily aliens, do you? But you want to tell your story about something that's so phenomenal it can't be explained. And I think I hear you saying a very common thing that we hear from people, which is people want to go on with their life. They don't want to have to hear this and rework everything they understand about life. In fact, in many ways, there's one emotion that seems to be the underlying current here that stops people from having these conversations. What is that emotion? Who said fear? A couple people. It is fear, isn't it? It's the same thing that stops people from talking in public. It's the same thing. It's the reason why we have this organization, because fear has become such a strong component in controlling people that, and I'll take this line from somebody that came to one of our groups one time, we don't need the government to tell us not to have these conversations, because we now police each other. Think about that for a second and let that settle in. We now police each other. We no longer need anybody to tell us. That's why we're here. We need to start having these conversations. I'm always amazed. I'll be wearing a shirt like this, and I was telling Valerie and Mike the other day, I was walking my dog and I was wearing this shirt, and this woman comes up to me and says, "Is that a kayaking shirt?" And I said, "No, it's not." She goes, "Oh, it's a UFO. We saw a UFO, and all this stuff happened." And she just starts, and she goes, "And I don't tell people about it." And that's really the society we're all living in, folks, isn't it? We come here, and it's hard for people sometimes to even walk through that door, because we're all in different spots of our comfortability. There's one extreme, which is, I don't care if I'm the crazy witch lady, right? That's a good extreme to have, in my opinion, because you know what? I no longer care what people think about me. I know what's true to me, and it's important for me. And I love that. We don't see that very often today. And the other extreme is, I'm gonna hold this in my whole life. I'm not gonna tell anybody about it, and it's gonna eat me alive because I am not being true to myself. Now that we know that about half of the people in this room have had various things happen, in terms of UFOs, about 1/3 of the people. What about other polls? You know, there's been a number of polls in the last few years. Some of them seem to echo each other, some not so much, but just to give you a look at certain polls that have happened, Huffington Post did a poll of 1,000 people in 2013, and margin error of about 4.2%, with 1,000 adults polled. And what's really interesting, if you look over here to the left, there's a couple of questions. First one is people who experience ghosts. Interesting question. Do you strongly agree in ghosts or having, you know, you look at this and it echoes really the next question, which is people who have witnessed UFOs or had that have an extraterrestrial origin, right? And what you see roughly is about 1/3 of those people believe that aliens, or excuse me, in this case, have witnessed a UFO and believe that there's an extraterrestrial origin. Isn't that the same number we had just in this room? Interesting, isn't it? Colleagues and I were talking about how this is going to work out. Well, I said, let's shoot from the hip, because you know what? We're not going to probably be far off from that. In fact, we're exactly where that is. A couple other quick polls. Ipsos, which is kind of a polling company, if you look over here, and I really like what they did, they broke down in terms of Americans that believe in UFOs. So again, hopefully they were defining that to the people that they polled. But of that, and it's interesting to note, there's a higher percentage of men than women in all of these. The majority, which is 56% of Americans, believe in UFOs. Does that surprise anybody? I see a yes. I see a couple of yeses there. Well, it's interesting. I was looking over a lot of different polls that were very similar to this, and if you look back to 2003, where the last time a lot of polls had been done, that was not 56%. That was more about 1/3, much less, in fact. And if we look down here, and I find this one really fascinating. 2012, there was a survey for National Geographic that found that 77% of Americans think that aliens have visited Earth. Well, that's considerably different when you look at the poll above, which is 45%. So we see over a 30% difference. So I'd be very curious about how those polls were conducted. I'm more apt to believe it's probably closer to that 56, but I want to believe it's more close to that 77. There's probably many of you as well. Okay, next slide. All right, you want to
So bear with me for just 1 second. So why is it important to talk to others after having an encounter? We talked about, I heard fear come up before, and each of us is going to talk a little bit about why we think it's important to talk about these things after having an encounter, and what has kept us maybe in the past from coming forward about having these things happen to us. For me, I'm in a similar place as the wonderful witch lady in the audience. I'm at a point in my life where I don't care what people think about me. I know my truth. I believe this has happened to me, and I don't care if others don't believe. They have every right not to believe. They weren't there. It's okay. I don't care. However, I have a daughter who's 13. If you've been to my booth at all out front this weekend, you've seen my mini-me sitting out there. And I do worry, I fear how it might affect her. Will her friends think she's weird because her mom says she's seen aliens? Will her friends' parents not let them come over because the mom is weird? They might talk about ghosts and aliens in that house, and I don't want my kids hearing that stuff. So my fear is based around being a parent and how it affects my child. Fortunately, my child is very strong and secure in who she is as well, so that definitely helps. But it's still always in the back of my mind, how is this going to affect her? You know, so that's a big thing for me. But I think if we can change these conversations and the attitudes around having these conversations, then I won't have to fear how it will affect her going forward in her life, and she'll be able to have these conversations much more openly than we do today. So that is my hope. That is why I'm here, because I care about the next generation, and I think they need to know these things are going on, and they need to be able to talk about them when they experience them.
Why it's important for me to talk about these things is really close to my heart and really personal. I've had experiences, encounters, abductions for most of my life. The earliest I remember, I was 3 years old, and there's fairly good indication that it started when I was an infant. And I never had anybody to talk to about it for most of my life. I mean, even today, I'm fairly open about it, but I can't sit there on the job site and start talking about it. People don't want to hear it, and if they did want to hear it, they don't understand it. So for me, this is really personal, and I don't want anybody to ever have to go through that. I can't allow it. I don't do public speaking, so excuse me. I don't do speaking. I learned how to talk and would talk to my grandmother for 2 years because she was outside of the immediate family. I mean, I don't talk to people. I don't talk about this stuff, or I didn't. I finally gotten to a place where I do, because as much as I hate it and much as I don't like being in crowds of people, especially on the stage in front of them, it's that important. This shatters people's lives. I mean, and over something that, you know, it's one of the biggest problems facing it's a world problem, and we can't talk about it. That's ridiculous. He's trying to get me to go into my experiences. Maybe I'll come back to it if we have time. I want to make sure we have time for everybody to speak and ask questions. I'll be here all day if anybody actually has any more questions. But yeah, no, this is important. This is real. I mean, and people need to be able to talk about it. You don't have to believe it if you don't want it, but you need to allow people to have the opportunity to talk about it.
What you don't know about Mike and I is we have this really interesting relationship where I try to push him, he laughs it off, and we do this little dancing game that makes us laugh. So, and I gotta say, even though I push him sometimes, he would never have been up here years ago doing what he's doing. So I am really proud of you for everything you've done, Mike. So we all have stories as to how we get into this, and initially when we started developing this lecture, we said we were going to tell our stories. So really quickly, I want to talk a little bit about why I do this and why I feel so strongly that we need to change how we talk about this subject with everybody. From when I was about 11 years old or so, growing up here in New Hampshire, I grew up in Rochester, and my father was a city councilman for 18 years. He was the longest sitting city councilman in the town. He was also House of Representatives for a number of years. He knew various people who were in politics here in New Hampshire back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and played a somewhat large role with things here in New Hampshire. And being the youngest by a considerable amount, almost like an only child, when I was at home alone with him, he would talk to me. And one day it started with, "Dad, do you believe in UFOs?" And he said to me, "I have to. I witnessed them, and I witnessed aliens once." And I looked at him and I said, "Oh, you're full of it. Nice try." And he goes, "No, I'm serious." I said, "Well, Dad, cut it out. Really? I mean, this is the same guy that told me he flew with Superman to help little children out at times." And I said, "Dad, really, what happened?" And he goes, "I'm going to be very honest with you about something, and I don't tell people about it." He said, "About a year before you were born, I was coming home from Northampton. For those folks that aren't from the area, that's the next town over from here, from Exeter." He said, "I decided to take the long route home," which both Dean Merchant and I have tried to piece together, and Dean is the person that started this festival about 7 years ago. We believe that was about 108, 101, and 125 coming into the back road of Rochester. It was at 1 in the morning, possibly 1976, possibly the fall time, and I look up, and above me to the right is a cigar-shaped object with 3 windows. And he said what was really strange was in each window there were these entities that had very dark black eyes, almost like almonds. And he said there was one of these creatures in every window, and in the center window, the creature had what I thought was a clipboard. It was taking notes of me, I think. And I just kind of laughed it off. I said, "Dad, you can't be serious." He said, "No, I am very serious about this." And he insisted that to me. And I said, "Dad, were there other ones?" "Yes, there were many in the background walking around." So being a young investigator at the time, that weekend I went to go visit with my mom, and I said, "Mom, do you believe in UFOs?" "I don't know, it's possible." "Do you think Dad's ever seen one?" "Well, he's probably full of crap." I went to walk away, and she said, "Stop. It was actually one night, about a year before you were born." And she went on to tell me the same story. And that to me was a confirmation that my dad really wasn't making this up. And for the next 2 years, I would have constant conversations. He passed away just a few years after that. But for the next 2 years, I would talk to him just voraciously about this. I wanted to know everything about the craft, what it felt like. I'd start to hear things on TV. "Dad, did you have missing time?" "No, I never missed any time." And he'd take me to the 25th anniversary of the Exeter incident. We would be here in the library, and I remember specifically being in a line with my father, and the woman behind us waiting to get in said, "Well, why are you both here? Tell me your story." And I immediately blurred out, "My dad saw a UFO and there were aliens in it, and it followed him home, and early in the morning all the way home." And he just looked at me and went, "Oh." And I think that was where it started for me, because I realized that we should not talk about that. That was the message that was given to me at a very young age. We don't talk about those things. Years later, I grew up, and for the last 13 years, I worked as a licensed social worker, helping families and children of abuse. And I would be the person that would go in and do those interviews, really hard interviews. We're talking about the stuff that people don't want to have to think about. And I spent years talking with children about their experiences. And it's funny how things always turn out, because as I started to get more into this in the later years and meeting Mike and getting re-involved, what I realized is it's very similar to what people go through when they have an experience and what it's like to have to live through some of the most traumatic things in your life, because actually this in some ways is worse. In fact, I was talking to Kathleen Martin, one of the presenters here yesterday, about this. In many ways it is worse, because not only do you want to share this with people and can it be life-changing and shift the way you view everything about the universe and life, but to have that information and to not be able to share it with the person next to you is almost harder. And when you throw in some of the traumatic things like Mike has had to go through, and possibly many of you in this audience, that is equal to the worst abuse you can ever imagine, and then you say, not only can I not talk to anybody, but they will immediately think I'm crazy. Well, folks, we have something that is even harder than living through abuse in some ways. We're living through a world of denial around a topic that changes lives and can cause very serious psychological issues for people. And that's why we're here today. That's why we formed this group, is we want people to be able to understand how hard it is for certain people. This is something people should be able to talk about. There need to be more professionals in this world that can help people through certain things. And we're committed to helping that happen. So once again, I want to get everybody involved. Crazy Witch Lady, you're going to know a little bit about this one. You ready for this? So when we tell somebody, or when we have an interaction with somebody, especially somebody we don't know or doesn't know what we've been through, and we say, hey, you know, I recently saw a UFO. What are the common negative terms? And I'm going to ask people to blur this out. Just shout it out at the top of your lungs. What are terms that you would likely hear that are negative that would put you in fear of wanting to tell people? Go ahead, anybody. Were you high, right? They were on drugs. Great one. Bunch of bullshit. You don't know what you're talking about. Absolutely. Can't be proven. Right? What else? Probably a plane. All right, we hear all the time, you know, you don't even know the difference between a plane, swamp gas, and a weather balloon. I got news for you folks. There are some things going on. They are definitely not planes. Not even closely resembling.
There's nothing we can do about it anyway, so why worry about it?
Oh, that's an interesting one. See, this is why we ask people, because we were thinking up all these terms. That's a great one. There's nothing we can do about it, so what do we care? Wow, you want to talk about disempowering. Folks, this is possibly the greatest topic of our time. It was a period in which we thought the world was flat, that the sun revolved around the earth. Unfortunately, we're at a different crossroads. This is probably the biggest topic of our time. And you're absolutely right, sir. There's nothing we can do about it. It's totally disempowering. Well, I'm here to tell you, and we're all here to tell you, there are little things that we can do about it, and we'll talk about that later. So here's why we bring this up. There's a truth behind every fallacy. What I mean by that is, when you see a person go out and actually forget about all of the stigmas that are associated. Crazy Witch Lady, I think you're a great example of what we're about to talk about. Behind the person who actually goes and does these things, there's a truth. What do you really call a person that openly talks about a very scary, life-changing event knowing that they're not going to be believed? What is that really? What terms would you use to define a person that has the ability to do that? Yes, over here. Thank you for saying that. Do people agree with what she just said? Yes. What is that like to have to put yourself out there? You're not crazy. You're actually courageous. Thank you for saying it, because that's actually one of them that we felt as well. What other terms would people in this room use to define a person that's willing to do that? Confident? That's a great, we had thought of that same one. Thank you for bringing that up, because it takes a level of confidence for somebody, confidence in oneself, right? It is not easy to be in front of people and say, I believe, I've had a sighting. I can't explain it. We need to be level-headed and grounded as we do it, because we run the risk of looking like some of these things. In other words, I always call it the how are you doing, right? In other words, we're in a society today, tell me if this is exactly what you're talking about, sir, where people all the time will say, how are you doing today? And they walk right off, and they don't even look at you in the eye, and they haven't even waited for a response from you. Has anybody experienced that? Is that authentic? Could be. Could be, because my wife and I were in Georgia this year, and we experienced the total opposite of that in Georgia. But has anybody else experienced that, where, how are you doing? And they walk right away? Raise your hand, I'm just curious. Have anybody here ever actually said, I'm having a horrible day, my cat just died last week, and you know, I saw a UFO, nobody in my family believes me. Has anybody actually done something like that? That's pretty cool. I know Andy has, because he never gives me a straight answer. What you're talking about is being authentic with people, and I think it's a very important part of what makes a person be able to have that hard conversation. When we're not only courageous and confident and comfortable with who we are, we can be, we can have those qualities. Thank you for bringing it up. So we had a couple of terms. Isn't that interesting? I think we had all of those same terms over here. Yeah, I'd love to hear it. Wow. Yeah. People agree with that? Over here. Right over here, hold on. Right over here. Vulnerable. Anybody ever thought about that before? We live in a society where it's very hard for people to be vulnerable, isn't it? It's hard. In fact, we put up all these exterior walls because we don't want to let people know how we feel, especially men. Right? Men have this, you have to be tough, you can't cry. What does it mean to be vulnerable in society? In fact, some people see that as weakness. And I would have to agree with you very strongly, because when you're vulnerable, You're being authentic and you're being true, especially when you are speaking your voice and your truths, right? The reason we're having this conversation, folks, and I do want to press on real quick, the reason we're having this conversation, we want to look at this with you today, is because the truth is not on the left. That's what you would hear from people. The truth is right over here on the right. And until we start looking at ourselves and believing in what has happened to us, we're never going to have social change, are we? In fact, we're going to be stuck in the same situation. We're going to talk in a little bit about some little things that we can all do in everyday life. They might not be the biggest answers, might not be a cure-all, but we're going to talk a little bit about that before we end here today. And I'd be interested to see other people's thoughts as we kind of move on, because, and I do appreciate everybody's insight into this. I wasn't sure how this was going to work out, but I think I'm seeing a lot of smiles on people's faces right now. And I think it might be hitting home to some of you. So the next question, this is going to be we're all going to kind of chip into this a little bit. Do you want to start a little bit?
These two are going to go through a list we made up with some important points, but the fact I want to bring up, and this man right here just kind of helped further what I was going to say. You say hi to somebody and they don't say hi back. We are so disconnected from each other. We are so disconnected from the food we eat. We are so disconnected from this phenomenon. We hear a story. We want to hear the story. We forget there's a face behind it. We forget there's a life behind it. These are real things. We need to bring it back to the people. That's what's important. If the people feel comfortable, they can come forward. And that's where the disclosure is going to come from. It's not going to be from a government. It's going to be from within. When we're comfortable and strong enough to all talk about this openly, and it's hard, and we'll get there. It'll take time, but we can do it. I think there's more of us than there are of them at this point. It's real close by the studies, and some of us ain't answering them studies correctly. There's a lot of simple things you can do to just strike up a conversation and put it in people's faces where they're not expecting it, but now all of a sudden they have to form an opinion on the subject. And we've got a fairly simple list that everybody here can do, and we're going to encourage you all to do it. And I'll steal one off the list from these pins you're wearing. Don't take them off tomorrow. Put them on your hat. Wear them around. Let people go, what is that? Now you have an opportunity to start a conversation that you might not have been brave enough to just walk up to somebody and say, hey, do you believe in UFOs? Feel free to use a prop. There's nothing wrong with it. The point isn't how you have the conversation or who you have the conversation with. The point is to have the conversations. And I'll let these two kind of fill you in on some other good ways.
So one that I actually want to pick off of our list is don't mock a person who talks about it. I actually had a quick experience I want to tell you guys about just this past week. I'm an author and I facilitate a writers group. And it's outside of the spiritual, paranormal, and UFO stuff that I do. So the people in the room didn't really know what I do. One of the gentlemen in the group who was brand new writes stories about aliens. So at the end of the group I said, hey, just in case you don't know, right down the road this weekend is the Exeter UFO Festival. I thought you'd like to know since you write about aliens. And he burst out laughing. Like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. He's like, oh my God, you actually do that around here? Like he was baffled and he had no interest. He doesn't believe in this stuff, but he writes about it. I was baffled by that and I wanted to know more because I couldn't fathom that. But I felt he was mocking us for believing in it, for hosting this, for having this. And that was really disappointing. Respect, that's another thing. Respect people, even if you think what they're saying is so completely out there. We hear some stuff that, as much as we believe, sometimes there's still that one thing that we're like, wow, that's really out there. But like I said, I know my truth. That person might know their truth. I can't criticize that. And that's a great way to make a difference, is to be supportive, don't mock them, and respect their experience, even if you don't believe them. Chuck, would you like to?
Some other things are just, for those of you, the half of you or the 1/3 of you today that raised your hand and said, yes, I've had an experience, it's unexplained, get your narrative down. find a way in a very common sense, grounded way to explain it. Because you know what? People will come at you with that left list, won't they? They will say you're the crazy witch lady or something's wrong with you. It's our job to show people that we are grounded, we're intelligent, and we don't just have these fanatical views that come out of left field. But more importantly, that yes, grounded, well-thought people have had experiences, and I'm not afraid to talk about it. That is one of the biggest things that we can all do in every day. I really like what Val said about wearing your pins. It's interesting how many people will come to you and strike up a conversation because they think it might be safe with you. We actually have booths in the strangest of spots where we talk to people. And I remember the first year we went to an air show, and Mike says, we're going to be at an air show talking about, Seacoast saucers. And I said, an air show? Are you kidding? He goes, yep, we're going to do that. And you should have seen the looks on people's faces when they see a bunch of people that work with experiencers and talk about UFOs. We actually had a mayor come up at one point, and I recognized him, and he kept looking at our booth. And it wasn't until I called him and I said, Mayor, how are you, sir? And he goes, oh, what? Hey. And I said, come on over. Are you familiar with Seacoast saucers? And he goes, no. I go, it's okay. I know that I'm going to be ruining your whole political life here, but come talk to us for a minute. And it was interesting because even though he didn't talk to us, I found out later he had had experiences. He just didn't want to share it. But what we noticed is during these booths, in one day we had about 6 people say, I've never shared this experience with anybody, but here it is. It isn't until we're willing to listen and put ourselves out there the first inch that you could actually help a person for the first time talk about that experience. It creates a chain reaction in society. So I'm going to challenge everybody here today to rethink how it is that you share and your willingness to listen. Because like this gentleman said, we live in a society where we are disconnected. People ask you how you're doing, they don't want that answer. They actually ask us all the time, how are you today? Oh, great, great. Give them the true answer. Shock somebody. Not so good, I didn't sleep last night. I saw a UFO and I couldn't explain it, and how about you? See what happens out there. There are little things like this we can all do. If we're going to make a change, it starts with us. I think Gandhi said that once, and I do believe that. I think it's up to all of us, if we want to see that world, to start within it, because like Mike said, we don't have to wait for the government to do a disclosure. We can start with common everyday things today that are going to create that social change. So I'm going to challenge everybody to do that. I think we're out of time. Okay. With what time we have remaining, are there any questions that we can try to answer from anybody in the audience before we do a shameless plug and tell you a little bit more about how you can reach us? Right over here.
That's an answer everybody wants, and it's one I don't even care to speculate on, because to me it's not the who's, the whys, the where they come from. It's not the cause, it's the effect. No matter what it is, whatever they want, the effect is real, and I'm more concerned about the effect than what their agenda. And I mean, you could ask 100 people and get 100 different answers, and probably 100 of them are wrong. So I mean, I think we'll find out one day, but it's not worth my time speculating on it when the problem's real, no matter what it is. But thank you.
I don't exactly agree with you, sir. I think this is the time to talk.
If that's where people's interests are, we have great researchers who spend their time studying the technology of how craft could get here and this and that. And I'm not saying it's not worth study. That's, for me personally, that's not where it is. It has its place within ufology for sure.
I also think I hear what Mike is trying to say, and I don't want to get off topic because we're not here to really speculate on all those things, and I do appreciate that question. What I think I heard Mike just say is, you know what, there's a lot of great presenters here that would be better suited to answer that question. What we are here to do is talk about the psychological component and what we can all do to create that social change, just to bring it back to why we're here. And lastly, over here. Well, that's great. That brings us right into the last part. Thank you so much. Round of applause for that. So what I'm going to say is, if you're ever interested in coming to one of our meetups, we have meetups for people that just want to learn more about ufology. Many questions that are out there. We have meetups for people that have had encounters. We have meetups for people that want to practice the spiritual basis and see what it brings. We have 3 major meetups every month. We hold them only 3 or 4 miles up the road. Like us on Facebook if you want to know more. Those of you that have Facebook, type in Seacoast Saucers Like us on Facebook. We do updates almost every day on upcoming events. We also have a webpage, seacoastsaucers.com. And more importantly, we hold these meetings at the KRI Center in Stratham, just at 81 Portsmouth Ave in Stratham, almost 4 miles away. And there are calendars on our table. We have a booth out front if you'd like to learn more, but I would encourage people to come to those meetups. Our next one is going to be Social Saucers. It's going to be this Friday, in 5 more days at 7 p.m. And we have these bigger conversations. So if you're ever looking for that, we'd encourage you to come. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here. It was a pleasure talking to you.
My name is Bob Cox. I'm president of the Kiwanis this year. I was driving over here this morning and I saw this landing in the trees near our house. So I was able to snag it and bring it in, and I can't think of a better home for it than the Seacoast Saucers. I'd also like to thank the Seacoast Saucers have really stepped up this year and helped us out in many ways, not only speaking, but Mike rode the trolley all day yesterday out to the landing site, and we certainly appreciate all their help. Thank you.
You know, I was just thinking, like, when you get a gift like that, whose living room does that get to go in? I'm sure they'll have a nice long discussion on the ride home about that one.
Hello, I am Lorraine Mark, and I'm from Westchester County, New York. I'm about 60 miles north of New York City. And I helped launch this vendor area about 2 years ago. I was their first trial balloon. I am also a vendor and member of the committee of Pine Bush, New York, and they are the UFO capital of the Northeast. This is a sister site here in Exeter. So I thought, let me come up and see if we can get something launched up here. We need some more aliens up here. So I decided, let's come up. I have a friend, Bill Smith, and he helped me get this together, and it's turning out to be a successful event. Pine Bush, New York, when I started it, it was about 20 spectators, and this day, as of this summer, it has grown to 7,000 spectators. So maybe that'll happen here at Exeter. Don't know, but we're hoping. And it's a wonderful cause. It just helps support local businesses, and it really makes it a really super alien fun day.